Hello and welcome to an audio deep dive of Shapez 2. My name is Petter Semelius, also known as Pepsen, and I'm the composer for Shapez and Shapez 2. In this video, I will focus on the music design, production, and the challenges I faced during development. Shapez 2 is a top-down factory building game where you extract and process geometric shapes in an endless, space-themed universe. The shapes are delivered into a central hub or vortex, and the player needs to deliver increasingly complex shapes to progress. The vortex will always give the player a new shape to deliver once a request has been fulfilled, making the game essentially endless. The game has no combat, no levels, no real narrative either, or anything you'd normally use as a condition to switch music. This is why we decided to keep the implementation fairly simple, similar to the original Shapez game. The first Shapez game had very limited possibilities in terms of implementation, as it was initially a browser game. The game could only handle one music track during gameplay that played in a loop. So what I did was stitch tracks together into one long track with seamless transitions in between, something similar to a DJ mix. And while Shapez 2 had more options in terms of implementation, we figured continuing with this simple track-based playlist made sense. Feedback for the music in Shapez was very positive, and there was no real reason to overcomplicate things in the sequel without having a clear idea of how to improve it. Sometimes it's better to keep it simple and focus on the music itself. The first Shapez did not have a theme, and I had the freedom to come up with whatever I thought worked for the game. This included classic instruments like piano, bass, guitar, and drum kit. The soundtrack already had some electronic elements, but it was mostly acoustic. For Shapez 2, this needed to change. I could not keep the acoustic part, and it sometimes even had a jazzy sort of sound that didn't really fit well with the space theme in Shapez 2. I wanted to tap into the expectations people have when playing a sci-fi game, but still keep the essence of the initial Shapez score. This included adding spacious pads, synth arpeggios, and a lot of movement through automation. A general feeling of floating and vastness was something I was aiming for, while still keeping a rhythmic element at times, adding drums to certain parts to represent the factory that's always moving, never sleeping, but also having calm moments, uplifting, and giving a feeling of safety, since there isn't any danger in this game. The biggest challenge was to find the right balance between foreground and background. Piquing interest here and there, but mostly working as an ambience or mood setter. I didn't want the music to take focus, but I still wanted it to feel present and something the player could stop and listen to if they wanted to. The music is fairly simple in terms of music theory and rhythm, as I wanted it to feel familiar and safe. Most of the tracks are in minor and with a 4/4 beat and do not really deviate. I instead created variation, movement, and interest through processing, automating volume, filter, reverb, panning, and delay, which was also the most important effect for this project. Let me show you an example of how I used delay. In this track, I have an ARP melody which sounds like this. As you can hear, it already has quite a lot of ping-pong delay. And to make it even more pronounced, I added compression at the end after the delay to enhance the delay even more. But we don't stop there. We add more. So during this whole section, I have another delay which slowly increases in mix value until we reach 100% mix value, and the delay has now taken over. The delay is now the new main signal, pushing the whole melody forward a slight bit, and in that sense creating a new melody, because it's not the same rhythm anymore. And this is what I try to do throughout the whole soundtrack. I try to be creative with processing and make it sound even more spacier, and like everything is moving and it's not really organized. But that was something I was trying to do for the whole soundtrack. The biggest difference between Shapez and Shapez 2 is the added third dimension. This is why I wanted to rely heavily on delay, and specifically ping pong delay, as well as automating panning to increase the sense of stereo movement, in an effort to make the soundtrack feel more 3D than the soundtrack for the first game. One of the challenges I faced during production were coming up with new, interesting ideas that fit the mood and palette I had chosen to follow. It was very easy to drift away from the intended mood, and the fact that I needed to compose over an hour of music with the same sort of style was sometimes difficult. I had to scrap multiple ideas because I strayed too far from the intended mood. Another challenge was to not overproduce. Sometimes I tinkered with the track for too long and actually made it worse. I'm never truly happy with my tracks, and it's really hard to know when a track can be improved and when it's time to let go. Art is never finished, only abandoned. This was a brief overview of the countless hours of thought and work that went into the creation of the Shapez 2 soundtrack. I hope you have time to check out the game and the soundtrack on Steam. I also want to show you that my gear, this is all my gear by the way, is as boring as my background. Thank you for watching. Bye!